to another episode of Untangled, the knitting and sometimes crochet. We had crochet last week, actually, if you're listening to this in order. The knitting and sometimes crochet question and answer show with me, Stuart, from the Wool Patch, and over there...
I'm Jimmy from Jimmy Does Knitting.
Good to see you again, Jimmy. As you all right?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Very well. Very well. All set up, ready for another 3 questions. As we said, the point of this podcast is to just give you knitting and crochet content straight away. So here we go. Hit the ground running. Question to start us off with. Had no details submitted, but I thought we should still talk about it, Jimmy, because it's something that's very topical in my shop. But the question I couldn't quite understand, but I'll read it as is and then we'll try and interpret it. I just found out about the world of modify needles. I think that would have been interchangeable. Don't know. Besides Ravelry, is there any other place you know that can provide me more insight on modifying interchangeable needles? That's where I get a tad confused about the question. You got any thoughts on that?
I think that's a tough one because I'm not exactly sure what they're talking about. But if we talk about interchangeable needles, then there are some resources and stuff. There are always a bunch of beginner videos that have that sort of information. Perhaps we should talk about what interchangeable sets are for those.
I think that's a great idea. Go right back to basics, Jimmy, and say, what is an interchangeable needle?
Okay, so normally when people think about knitting, they think about you got that grandma with the 2 sticks and she's knitting in the cartoons, right? So those are what we call straight needles. Now, so those are the pins, the straight needles. There are also fixed circular needles. So it's kind of like 2 little straight needles, and then I'm trying to look around. I have some over there, but you have 2 straight needles, and then you have a connected cord that makes them circular needles. And so those are fixed in terms of you cannot change out the needle head, or you cannot change out the cable length. So those are the different sets. Those are the tips for an interchangeable set that you have right there. And what an interchangeable set is for people like me who knit obsessively, it is a little easier to have that because you can you don't have to keep track of so many needles and so many cords and all this stuff. So it comes with the needle tips, as you see there, and then the cords. And there are a bunch of different types of needle sets and stuff, but basically you have that. So that's an interchangeable needle set. A lot of times they come in a little like binder if you buy a set, but you can also buy the pieces individually or supplement as you want.
Yeah, so there's an individual one.
And they come in all shapes, sizes, lengths, some for lace, some for short knitting, some have longer needles, there's wood, there's metal, there's quite a variety out there now.
You must have read my mind, because sometimes we plan in advance and we chat, but we haven't done with this one as much.
No.
But you'll be amazed at what came in the shop today, Jimmy. Brand new Knit Pro. This is perfect for a Mother's Day gift. I feel like this is a plug for my shop now. But look at this, because you said about coming in sets and short. These interchangeable needles are perfect if you love knitting top-down jumpers, for example, and you want to knit in around your sleeve, but you don't want to do magic loop. Well, look at these beauties. I think it's aimed at Mother's Day. It's called Mini Bouquet from Knit Pro. And look at these. You will go, I'm sorry, podcast listeners on Spotify. This is very much a visual thing. Look at them, Jimmy.
Those are really nice.
They are tiny. I think they are an inch. Have I got a tape measure? No.
Those have to be 2-inch needles, right?
2 inch.
But those are tiny, yeah.
And look at the cord. So look at the circumference there. And it's perfect for knitting. You would normally knit. Where's my other camera? With those sort of 9-inch circulars with socks, but socks are normally 2.5, 2.25, really thin tips, whereas these tips are made for bigger purposes. So the small one there is 3mm and it goes up to 6mm, because this is really for jumpers, sleeve knitting and getting that circumference. And I now am a convert to these type of interchangeable needles, because knitting in the round, I love a top-down raglan, but magic looping a sleeve, oh my lord, Jimmy, it's
I'm right there with you. I have a pair of minor Chaogu short circulars, and they're interchangeable with the main needles that I have, and they all fit in and they all work. And you know me, I knit like a jumper a month at least. And so I've done a lot of sleeves. And those interchangeables for those short circulars are my jam. They're my preferred method. They're not for everybody, but for me, I think that they're really nice and comfortable.
And you just hit the nail on the head when you said that for you they're good, they're not for everyone. And that is right, because I've had customers at my shop, because this is quite a new thing. These short interchangeables are only coming out on the market, certainly over the last 6 months. The technology is getting better with the join for sure. But it is, because you're kind of having to change your style of knitting. You can't do like old school, like you were saying, a knitting pin where the knitting pin would sit like that and you would throw. There is no way you're going to be throwing. So you end up being a flicker and your whole style changes. Or continental style, you end up picking it through like that, because you're holding it, wouldn't you say, on the tips there?
Yeah, it does. And some people say that the shorter needles give them more of a hand cramp, which is why they offer interchangeable sets, especially for like the more regular ones, not the short circulars. They have different needle lengths. Some people are more comfortable with the 5-inch tip. Some people are more comfortable with like a 4-inch tip. So it also, it depends on how you knit and how your hands are and how it feels with everything.
Yeah. And that's great, because I know one of my customers who comes to my shop, Sue, and watches this. She uses the 4-inch circulars. So this is a standard length 5. That's how they all come. But you can get them, they call them specials, which are 4-inch. And Sue will say, I love the 4-inch. And she's only got to that by trying. Now, if you have a local yarn shop, this is where retail shops, your local yarn shops, are so precious, because you can try them. So if you came into my shop, I would literally open this up for you and I would put it together, or like I've done here, I'd get the tips and I'd screw them on, and I'd have some knitting handy, and you could actually try it and see if it suits your style. And that's the beauty with interchangeables. It's then come into the shop, have a play. Do you want to do it magic loop? Do you want to try the short circulars and use it? Absolutely use that resource, because they're bound to have some samples with the yarn already attached. I keep that at the back just in case, so I don't even have to make it up. But yeah, wouldn't you say, Jimmy, go to your yarn shop and try and use that resource?
Yeah, I mean, local yarn stores are a great place for this sort of thing. They come in a bunch of different price points. You can just buy, make your own interchangeable set. You can buy like a big, one with a ton of needles and kind of build it out from there. There's just so many options. Yeah. And I think that you just need to figure out what works for you the best. And if you are curious about how to specifically use the interchangeable needle sets, they vary from set to set. I have 3 different sets, and they all have a different mechanism or a different way of attaching.
Yes. Yeah, that the join bit, isn't it?
Yes. So I have the Addy clicks, which are like you like push it in, it's spring loaded.
Click.
Then there's like the Knit Pros, which I think you were showing, which have like a specific key that you put in with it, or at least the ones that I have. Yeah,
it's a this and higher. They have you twist it, but let's do it like that. You twist it, but you can't get the full grip tight enough from that. Can you see it slipping? This slips in my finger. And what might happen, which has happened to me many times, as you knit, because you knit and there's a circular motion and a movement, what happens is it gradually, can you see that gold there? It gradually comes undone. And there have been many times that I've been knitting and then, oops. So what you do with, these are higher, but you also get it with Knit Pro. You see that little hole? Well, with Knit Pro, let's go back to this handy case. You get, where is it? You get your key, and all the key does is it goes into that hole, and it then acts as a leverage, so you can push up against that with your left hand. Can you see how the key is indenting into my fingers? And I can now twist with my right hand there. Now that cannot come undone. All right, if I twist that, it will just slip in my fingers and it won't come undone. But the only thing is, you will then need that little key to take that off. So keep them really handy. That's where the cases come in handy, or have a little pouch or a pocket. But yes, so the key will come with Knit Pro, or like with higher, maybe even Chaogu. I don't use Chaogu, it's a similar brand. What did Chaogu do?
No, I use a T-pin for Chaogus.
Ah, right, yeah. But as you said, Jimmy, they are all in different price points. It's almost seen, I jokingly say here in the UK, I link them to supermarkets. So you've either got your Lidl or your Aldi, then you've got your Asda, then you've got your Morrison's, your Tesco, your Sainsbury's, your Marks and Spencer, and so forth, till you get to Harrods. It's similar like that in the knitting world, where Knit Pro are, where Addy are, where Chaogu, and that perceived value and price points. But there are very many different price points, aren't there? And you find your brand that you connect with. The brand maybe with their philosophy, like Knit Pro being made in India with the predominantly women based there, or whether it's higher and Chinese engineering, where they've got the, and I'll show you, if I push my button, they were the pioneers of the swivel joint. Can you see that? There's a ball and socket in there. So when you put your cable into the tip there, the wire will just twist and circle around. So rather than it being really annoying, it will always stay down because of that pivot joint. And they were one of the first companies to bring that out, and now I think Chaug have got it, and loads of brands are developing that swivel technology. Knit Pro only developed it towards the end of last year, and now all their cables are swivel too. So it depends on what you like. And do you like something fancy? There are some brands that do beautiful colours, aren't there? Like is it Leica?
Nika, I think is how you pronounce it, but they have pink ones, they have a rainbow one, they have like denims. Lantern Moon has like these beautiful like ebony ones. Yeah. There are copper needles out there. Yeah. There are like driftwood. Yeah. I mean, you can really go all fancy with this if you really want to in terms of aesthetics.
Come on then, Jimmy. How many sets have you got? Actual big sets. Have you got loads or have you just got one?
No, I have 3 actual big sets and 1 for the minis. Yeah. And then they have like supplemental needles for that. But since we're talking about this, I'm appealing to the viewer here. I need your help. I would like a fancier set. Not like Chaogu fancy, but like a little higher end of a wooden needle interchangeable set. So like 3 millimeters to 5 millimeters ish, or which I think is like US 3 to 8. If you have suggestions, I'm willing to spend a bit of money because I knit so much. But I am very curious. I have Knit Pro Symphonies, which are beautiful and wonderful, and they're wooden, so I bought them for traveling. But I'm thinking sometimes just the yarn wants a wooden needle in my mind, and if you could recommend one, I would appreciate it.
It would be lovely to see. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, wooden. Leica are famous for their wooden ones, the driftwood. Higher do a bamboo. I think actually one of these was bamboo. It was actually. That was a higher bamboo one. But I used it with my lavender blue, so it's now almost an indigo. I'm just trying to think of I don't know many other sets actually off the top of my head that are wooden. You did say Lantern Moon. Do they do interchangeables? I didn't know whether they were just straight pins. I think they're just straight pins, aren't they?
I don't know. I want to say they do interchangeables.
Don't know. Let us know, viewers, because you might be sat there. Hello, watching on YouTube. Hello, you. Yeah, you, those wooden ones that you've got. Just go into the comments now and tell us what those wooden ones you're using. They look nice. There are so many brands. Yes. And that's also another thing, isn't it? If you're buying interchangeables, do you want to get 2 sets? Because it is good to have a wooden version and a metal version, because I do change my needles according to my yarn. Do you? I don't just have one set all the time. I will change according to the yarn.
I do. I primarily use my Chaogus because those are my favorite, but sometimes I just need a wooden needle.
Yeah. I'm a higher person, so I'm always on metal tips, and because they're nice and sharp, they glide under. But you do just sometimes want wooden. So for my slip over I'm making at the moment, they're on wooden needles because the fibre is just lovely and snuggly. It's alpaca and mohair, and it just feels right to be on a wooden needle. Let's just finish off this question from Unknown, because I can't help but think modifying is in there somewhere. So where they say modifying interchangeable needles, I wonder if they're thinking, can you modify it by using a cable from one company to fit into a pin of another company? Do you think that's probably what they could have meant to, Jimmy? Can that be done?
I don't know. I don't think it really can be done. You might be able to do it, but I would stay sort of with one company. Now, I will say that like different sets from different companies are interchangeable. So like anything Knit Pro, if you go for the metal or the wood or even some of their higher end, I think like the Gingers, those are all compatible with each other, right?
Absolutely.
Same thing with I know the Gu, if you have a different needle or a different cord, assuming it's the same size, it will all work together. So I think in that way it's modifiable, but I think it's more about like how do you just use the needles, maybe? And if that's the case, I am sure the brands in general or some YouTuber is like, this is how I use my, Forte set or something like that. Yeah. And there'll be a video that you can watch. If you're watching this, you know how to watch those videos. So maybe just look it up and they can walk you through, because they all have the different way of changing or a swivel cord, or they want to talk about the needles in a certain way. So they'll talk you through it all when they do that in the video.
Absolutely. And they all have different types of tips. And it's according to what your preference is on those tips. But again, that comes back to your local yarn shop. Go in and see what tips they've got, what interchangeables they've got, and ask them if you can look at them. They should, if they're worth their salt, they should be taking those needles out of the packages as much as possible, which are really easy. They're now all in paper packaging, or the higher. Well, for a very high brand, Jimmy, this always makes me chuckle. I mean, look at this. We're talking top end, higher Gu. Look, a bit of card in a plastic poly pocket, and then the needles go in like that. I do find that, where's the other one? Oh Lord, it's on the tip here. I better do this now. Oh no, I can't. I've got to get the key, haven't I? I do find it fascinating how these high-end brands actually sell them in what looks like something out of the garage. Bizarre, isn't it?
Sometimes it's a little funny.
But you can see, therefore, how easy it is to get out. So go to your local yarn shop and have a play. I would love a customer like that came in and was learning, wants to try interchangeable needles, and then I can spend half an hour with them going, look at this one, look at this one, look at this one. And you don't have to buy the set. You could just buy, a classic 4mm if you're on double knit, and you can go off and try. Or even spend 10 minutes at the yarn shop just having a knit on a sample. Loads of options. Hope that helps. Whoever you were, thank you very much for the question. Right, let's do the next one. Oh, this is right up your street, Jimmy. Yarn and swatching. I understand the need for swatching, but the idea of using yarn that could be used for the project always makes my brain do somersaults. What is your tip for swatching and not having to play yarn chicken at the end of a project? Do you buy an extra skein? Do you swatch and then frog? Oh, Bertus is from you. Hey Bertus, New York. Okay, let's go from the top there. Jimmy, the idea of swatching and the yarn that you've got for your actual project.
So I either knit where I modify people's patterns to fit my body, which usually is adding length to at least the arms and the body in some way. So I think that I'm going to use more yarn than the recommended. Okay. Or I am making it up as I go, which also inclines me to get a little bit more yarn, because I am one of those people that I would rather be looking at it than looking for it. And that's actually most of my stash is just like leftover yarns from stuff, which is fine because I can swatch. So my answer is just buy that extra skein just in case, especially if you're modifying the pattern in some way. And you can always unravel a swatch. I mean, unless you like cut it, you can just unravel it and reuse it.
Absolutely, I agree. Just whatever your yarn is, do your swatch with the first ball of that yarn, and then just most of my customers will just do that. They'll unravel it. They've got gauge. They know they've got gauge, or if they haven't, they've changed the needle. They've done another swatch and now know what they're on. Unravel it and then start knitting again. That's the simplest answer, isn't it? Now, a fancy answer, which is what I would like to do, but I don't, but it sounds really nice, is to get a really nice journal book that's got each page, and you do a swatch, you cut it, and you stick it in your journal book, and you write down what yarn it is, or you copy the label, or you stick the label on because you bought that extra ball or whatnot, and you can stick the label on, and you can put the date on, you can say the yarn it is, what the needle it is, and what the gauge is, and then you've got a book full of beautiful swatches. I would love that, Jimmy.
You are a fancier man than me, Stuart.
But just imagine that, because 2 months later or 2 years later, you see a new, or a pattern that you like, and you go, oh, I'd like to use that yarn, Let Loppy, that I used 2 years ago. Where do you go? You go back to your journal, and you can see your swatch. You've got it all there. You've got all the details there. You don't have to do another swatch again because you've kept that beautiful record in that book. Now that's proper.
I'm gonna argue with you though. I think you do have to do another swatch. Your attention changes over time and what's happening in life and the needles you use. So that swatch from 2 years ago is not going to be the same swatch as you do now.
You're such a goody-goody.
It will be close. Look, if you're swatching in general, you're not going to get what you're going to get, especially if you do a garment, just because of the weight, the construction, it's going to change. So, I mean, in general, it will be close, unless you're doing something weird or you've really changed in a different way. But it will give you a good indication whether or not you can use that yarn, but I would not use that as the exact tension that you're going to get for the thing.
Well, there you go. You've then got to do another swatch. Maybe you're going from a wooden needle to a metal needle. Then you would... this is me in my school days. What I would do, I'd go back to that page where the Let Loppy is, and then I'd put a little pocket in, attach it, glue it in, and then put in your new swatch saying that this was done on a wooden needle rather than the metal needle. And how cool a resource is that?
It's a really good resource, yeah.
Well, we did say, I think we said when we talked about when people can go from fingering weight, could they knit their jumper in DK weight? I think we talked then about yarn and swatching and trying to perhaps keep a record of everything. And do you know what? It's actually quite nice to keep a record of a yarn label and the wool that you use, because so many people don't keep their yarn labels and they've got random balls lying around and they don't know what it is. But that's really cool. Then you look through your journal and go, oh, that was that yarn. There's my ball band. I know my meterage. I know my washing instructions and everything. But I suppose in an ideal world, we haven't got time for doing all that sticking and gluing and stuff like that, have we? So we don't swatch at all either, do we?
I mean, it takes a special person to do that, but they're out there.
But yeah, do your swatch, see where you're at, frog it back, and then start your actual knit. And start it with that yarn, or put that to one side because that was the extra ball that you might need, and then start with your posh yarn. But good on you, Jimmy. I think that's right. If you can afford it, just go up one more ball just in case, to be sure. Don't you think? If you've done your yardage calculations and everything?
Yeah, I mean, in general, when you get a pattern, they have some extra yarn in there, right? Like they're not expecting you to hit it exactly. Like they give you some stuff, but if you're really worried about it, buy that extra ball. If you can't afford or you don't want to buy that extra ball, you can unravel your swatch and it will be fine.
Yeah. And if you start a journal and you're sticking them all in, send me some pictures, please.
I was gonna say, email Stuart, get into his DMs.
Oh, those sort of projects were right up my street when I was at school. Very much a visual learner. I loved making these books where you stick things in and you could flip things down and you could add things and it would be, oh, that's nice. Oh, it's almost like a diary. In fact, I think Patty Lyons has released a cool project book recently where you can fill in the pages. It's got a title, yarn, and you can fill all in, and then you turn over to a new page to a new project. I might have to look at getting one of those. Good old Patty. Right, last question then. Zoe, thank you for your question from Canada. Right, here we go. So many knitting patterns are using mohair silk. Oh, absolutely. I completely agree with you there. Held with wool right now. Oh, yeah, sorry, I said that wrong. That's because I interrupted. So many knitting patterns are using mohair silk held with wool right now. They look great, but it can double the cost of a sweater, be uncomfortable for people with sensory issues, and sometimes it's just too warm. What yarns are good substitutes for these, and what are the trade-offs? Superb question, very topical too. What do you say, Jimmy? You go first.
So there are a couple solutions to this. One, I infamously do not like mohair. I am against this fingering weight in mohair trend, and what I do is get a DK weight yarn that will give me the gauge.
Yeah.
So you can always just go up to a yarn size usually, and that will get you the gauge you want, and then you can just buy one sweater's quantity if you're knitting a sweater sort of thing. That is my go-to way of doing it. However, there are mohair alternatives. And you can look at it in two ways. There's like lace weight alternatives, because mohair silk is usually a lace weight yarn. And then there are also fluff alternatives, which can actually be a lot thicker in ways of doing things. So in terms of lace weight, I know that Lana Grossa and Holst have like a alpaca lace weight, which is just really smooth and nice. I've worked with it. It's lovely. It will add that extra meter or thickness that you need, but it will have that softness and that drape to it. There's also like a fluffy alpaca. So there's like a mohair, but it's actually alpaca.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Surrey
that
alpaca.
You can use.
Yeah.
Surrey, yeah. A lot of times those are actually like fingering weight or above, but you can get one in like a lace weight. And then there's stuff like Einbands, which is by Isatex, which are the people that make like Pluto Lopi, Let Lopi, Alsos Lopi, those sort of things, which is more like a woolly wool that you can hold with something. So I think those are at least the lace weight alternatives on my radar and substitutions that I've played with before. What do you think?
Absolutely that. Yes, it's mohair is, I find, very scratchy. It just irritates my skin. It's like, oh, I don't want that next to, especially on a scarf. I find alpaca is better for me. Alpaca is softer than mohair, so that sits better. You can find more commercial companies that will reduce the amount of mohair with a higher amount of acrylic. So I've got one of those, a much more affordable mohair in my shop for the current craze. I have to say though, I'm not, it's not that I'm not a fan of it, I just don't want to do it because I don't want that fluff. I don't like that effect. At H&H Cologne, there were a lot of mohair brands around, and it felt like each commercial company had their own mohair too, and a lot of the samples were using it. And it will probably still be around. To be fair, I mean, mohair was huge in the 80s, wasn't it? So I think it's always going to be around. What's the usual idea? Most people are using a mohair plus a 4-ply, which makes technically a double knit yarn. So therefore, ditch that and just find a double knit yarn you like. That's what you said, wasn't it, Jimmy?
Yeah, that's usually what I do.
Yeah. And then just swatch with that yarn and see if it makes the same gauge that the designer is asking for. It's an interesting thing, that the whole mohair thing, Zoe. Trade-offs. what would the trade-offs be, do you think, Jimmy? If you're going for a cheaper mohair or an alpaca, is there a trade-off?
There are different qualities of fibers and stuff. I have experienced this, but that's just a different way that it goes. Like, to be honest, drops is quite affordable and accessible and will get you the look. It's not the best feeling. Yeah. But, you go to Esair has really like fluffy, thick mohair, and Westwool has more of like a silky, smooth mohair. So it's all about like what you're trying to achieve with things. I do think that you can play with depth and color when you add another strand of mohair to some yarn, but you could also just go and buy a beautiful Heather DK yarn or something like that. So It's really your preference of things.
Completely right. Absolutely. And you know what? Sometimes it's nice not following the crowd. So just don't do the mohair at all. But if you do love that halo that it creates, that fuzz, that glow, then by all means go for it. That's the beauty of knitting. You knit what you want to do, what you're interested in, don't you? And speaking of knits, just to finish off, Jimmy, what have you got on there? Tell the viewers and the listeners.
I have my Flatengenser by, I always butcher this name, by Birger. He's a Norwegian designer, and he has beautiful patterns. And I fell in love with this on a podcast, and then I bought it and I had to make it. It's great.
Absolutely love it. It's the detail of that color work. How many the graphs that you were following? I bet you couldn't do that whilst watching the telly, could you?
Of course I did. No, it's not that bad.
No. Once you get into it, we talked about graphs, knitting charts on a few podcasts before. Once you get into it, you learn it off by heart and you're just whizzing around, aren't you?
Yeah, for sure.
We'll put all those links down below, and if you're interested in Jimmy's jumper, they are, that's a JJ. You can click on that and go and find out the pattern and do it yourself too. As always, send us your questions in. We love talking about them. We get around 3 or 4 per episode, around half an hour. If you're listening to us still walking the dog or driving the car, you work now? You're not late, are you? If so, blame Jimmy. And if you're watching on YouTube, thank you very much. Good to see you, and drop a comment below. We always love reading them and replying to them. I noticed, Jimmy, you were replying to a couple of messages. One was quite technical on the last one, so I'm glad you answered that.
Yeah, I haunt the comments for a little bit, and then I don't look at it. But yeah, I for sure try to reply when I can.
Oh, I really appreciate it. It's really good. Thank you very much. Well, there we are. We'll see you on the next episode of Untangled, which will be next week or whenever you're listening to us. Cheers, everyone. Thank you. See ya. Bye.
Bye.